In this video, I want to talk about the final project for Code Sprint B. So we are heading into week 3 where we're going to have our first milestone for that final project, which is a write-up and a plan for your database. Then we will have a progress milestone next week, and we'll have the final submission the last week of class. And check out the last class recording that's posted in Canvas for a walkthrough of these final requirements, but you can read through the final requirements here. We're basically going to be building things that meet these requirements through our class project, and then you can think about taking that skeleton that we created and applying it to your own context. So for this first milestone, the write-up and data plan, this is 20% of the final project grade, and it should be some easy points to get for the final project. We're really just focusing on planning here. And before you start this, make sure that you do the movie rating tutorials from this week, because you will see the final movie rating app we're creating, and that will help you scope your idea for your final project in this class. And one sort of note here that I've got is that you can either bring your project from Code Sprint A forward or start a new project for Code Sprint B, but either way that you do it, think about using the movie rating app that we're creating as a template for your final project. So if you're bringing your project from Code Sprint A over to Code Sprint B, you may want to start using the movie rating app skeleton and then bring over pieces of your project into that template, rather than doing the reverse of taking your existing code and trying to work with it, because the movie rating app that we're making together will set you up in a good place for meeting all the requirements. And if you're starting a new project, then think about like, oh, how can I take the movie rating app and remix it slightly to make it my own? So like the movie rating app is very general in its structure, so you could, instead of being a movie rating app, it's like a to-do list application, or it's like a recipe storing app, a cooking app. So make sure you're thinking about that movie rating app before you start tackling this. And what I want to walk through in this video is how to sketch out your database. So you're going to be submitting a write-up, which is just like a written description of your project, but you're also going to be creating your sketch of your database. So there are 2 references to keep handy and go through. There's the Cloud Firestore data model that's linked from the write-up page. This reviews what documents and collections are. You should be pretty familiar with those at this point, having watched the video from Firestore on this. But really briefly, a collection is a spot in your database that can store multiple documents, and your documents are the things that contain data. So in our movie rating app, we have a movies collection, and inside of that collection are a bunch of documents, one for each movie. And we have structured those documents to have a title and a rating and a release year and other pieces of data. So go through this, and then also, this is also linked from that write-up page. This is the list of the data types that are available inside of Firestore. So you can store an array, a boolean, bytes, date and time, floating point, a point, an integer, a map, null, reference, and text string. Those are the only possibilities you have for filling out the data with inside of one of your documents. Okay, so what I'm going to do is walk through, using this as a guide, making the sketch for the movie application. So there's a site called Drawio that you can go to that allows you to do some diagramming in your browser. You can also do this on pencil and paper as long as it matches the same format. So I'm going to create a new diagram. I'm going to create a blank diagram. And I chose to save mine to my device, so it's going to prompt me where to store that file. I'm going to save it as movie app database sketch. And I'm going to put this into my teaching folder with week 3. So I've got a blank diagram, and in draw.io, you've got these different elements that you can drop onto the page, like text boxes and boxes. And then once you click on them, you can kind of resize them and move them around however you want, and use the sidebar here to restyle them. So like with the text, I can go to the text panel and pump up the text size. I could make it bold and italic. And with the boxes, you can sort of change the fill and line style and all sorts of elements. For our purposes, what I'm going to do is create a box here. And put some text here, and this is my movie collection. So as you're sketching, what you want to do is map out all of the collections that are going to be in your database, and map them out using this structure here. For the movie rating application, there's only one collection, and if you're following the same template, you're probably only going to have one collection in your project as well. So you may only need one box in your diagram here. So I'm going to call this movie collection, whoops, this should be movies collection. And then under the UML section, which stands for Unified Modeling Language, which if you're in programming, you're probably familiar with this. If you're not, don't worry about it. We're going to use one of these, this particular one here that gives us a name and a set of fields. We're going to use this as our template for sketching things out. So I can delete by selecting and then clicking delete some of these fields so that I just have a box that says class name and then has a field : type. So I'm going to use this as my representation of the schematic of my documents. So I'm going to label this as schematic movie document and shrink the text size here a little bit. And restyle this slightly. Okay, so for our schematics, what we want to do is have our pieces of data that are going to be stored in our database described here. And the way this is going to work is that we're going to have a comment that describes what the piece of data we're storing is. So I'm going to store the title here. So I'm going to say stores the title of the movie. And then below that, I'm going to put the key, the thing that we store that data under in our database here. So title, all lowercase, : and then the type of data, the data type. So these are the things that we can see here. So in terms of a title, we can store that as a text string. So I'm going to say string. And then I'm going to resize this box a bit. So you're going to be going through each piece of data that is stored into a document, so each field, and describing it, putting a description, putting the name of that field, and then the type of that field. So if you compare that to your console, console.firebase, and we're looking at the database from the class project here, I have my movies collection, I have one of my documents, and I'm just translating this here into a general schematic, where instead of putting in specific values for rating, release year, title, I'm describing what those values are supposed to represent and giving you the data type for that. So I might also want to store the date and time when the movie was added, and that I might name that field date added and store it. If I look at my supported types here, I have a type for storing date and time. So I'm going to represent that here by saying date and time. And then I'm going to pause the video for a second while I finish filling out this schematic. And here we go. Okay, so this is finished. I have labeled each field with a description. And then I have the field names and the values of those fields after the colon. And there's one added wrinkle here, is that I have also marked some fields as optional using a question mark. So I'm saying that in my movie document, I'm always going to have a title, date added, rating, genres, release year, and then sometimes I may have a review that stores the user's review, and sometimes I may have a streaming platform that that movie can be found on. And so I've got title, date added, rating, which is an integer, and the description says 1 through 5. I have genres, which is an array of string values, and those are the genres for the users choosing to tag the movie under. I have the release year as an integer. I have the review as a string, streaming platform as a string. So this is half of my sketch. It's the schematic. And then what I also want to do is map out some example movie documents. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and Control-C to copy this, Control-V to paste it, and create example movie documents that have all of the values filled in. So this one, let's say this is Knives Out, and I'm going to make this, I'm going to make this purple so that it's distinct from my schematic. And for the specific examples, I'm going to get rid of the comments that describe the fields. And get rid of the question marks here. And so for filling out an example, what we want to do is, instead of saying the data type, we want to fill in what the data type is. So in this case, this is a string that says Knives Out, the date time, maybe this is 12:01:19 at 3 p.m. I quite liked this, so I'll give it a 5. My genres, I might have this listed as mystery and crime, comedy, in an array. The release year, that was 2019. Maybe this one has the optional review filled in, and so I say, a really fun movie because. And then this one is streaming on Amazon Prime. So this has that optional filled in with a specific value. And there we go. We've got one done. And I'm going to pause the video for a second while I copy and paste this and fill out a second example. Okay, so I pasted in a second one here for Get Out. And this one we can see does not have the review and streaming platform filled in. Those are optional values, so it's possible to have movies that don't have those fields in our database. So taken together, what we have is this schematic which describes the structure of all movie documents in our database. And then we have examples mapped out with specific values. And going through this process of thinking about the schematic and thinking about specific values, both of these will help you get closer to your database structure. This is just one, there are many ways to think about structuring a database. This is just one way that we can sort of map it out on paper. And what you're going to be doing for this assignment is, for every collection in your database, you're going to be creating this kind of structure where you have the name of the collection, you have the schematic of the document that is stored inside of that collection, and then you have examples mapped out for that schematic. And you'll have a minimum of 2 examples mapped out for each schematic. So you can use Drawio to do this. You can use the styling tools to kind of make it a little bit more readable. And then you can take a screenshot, and you can also, or you could also export as a PNG to get a, let me do a quick export here to my device by hitting download. So now I've got a PNG that I can post to Teams of this and submit to Canvas. So once you're done in Drawio, do that export, you've got it. Or if you're doing it on paper, you can just take a picture and submit it that way. Okay, to summarize with this, you're doing this write-up and this data sketch, and both of these are in the planning process where you're not actually writing any code, but you're getting to start thinking through your project, which, if you do this well, will make the rest of implementing things smoother.